2019-2020 elections. This motion was moved by Councillor Campbell and seconded by Councillor Teja. Councillor Campbell, would you like to speak to this motion?
So Councillor Campbell, social science counselor, speaking in favor of this motion. So it seemed as though every debate in this election cycle, there seemed to be one women in leadership question, and there was for sure an array of responses from each candidate, but what was clear throughout was that there was commitment to this issue. So therefore, this motion takes a proactive approach towards the issue of female representation in the 2019-2020 election. Oh yeah, is that 2019? Yeah, sorry. Or 2018, 2019. Yeah. So I understand the scale of this issue is extensive and that is a structural issue more than anything. However, as a council, it is our responsibility to address the issues that affect our constituents. And this motion does not just affect 50% of the student body, but the entire student body. Because as this issue doesn't just affect females, but has a broader impact on campus as a whole. So as a result, I feel as though this is an integral first step in establishing a strong female presence in leadership positions here on campus, especially the USC.
Councillor Teja, would you like to speak to this motion?
I'm Teja, Huron President. I just want to discuss a little bit about what this motion kind of covered when we were in the standing committee stage. So part of what we discussed was the actual action clause of the motion. And so initially it was tasking specific members of the executive, and we decided to rework it to have it be a general USC executive to work with relevant campus stakeholders to create this report. And so we thought that having this as a broader motion would allow the USC executive to sort of create and task as per their own needs and schedules. We were also discussing with Danny in session about timelines for having this report done, and it was agreed upon that October, I believe, was the appropriate timeline in order to give the executive enough time to create a comprehensive report while still having enough time prior to election season in order to implement a lot of these changes. We also discussed the purview of this motion, making sure that it addressed divisional and affiliate level candidates as well, and so the action plan wouldn't simply be for the USC, but also for all divisional and affiliate elections as well. And that's why I'm in favor of this motion.
Any questions regarding this motion? Okay, we'll now enter debate. And seeing no debate, we will call to question on this motion using clickers, and the polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to our motions from the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. Starting off with the club's Governance Committee Terms of Reference Amendment. This motion is moved by Councillor Ma and seconded by Councillor Watson. Councillor Ma, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, please. So this motion was brought forth in our standing committee, and essentially what it's calling for is just ratification of what's currently already been done. So for the past year, there's been a member that has, I guess, informally been helping club's governance interpret specific policy, and this would just be ratifying it to ensure that this would carry on into next year. So again, to reiterate, this is something that's already happening, and this would just be kind of putting it on paper. So yeah.
Councillor Watson, would you like to speak to this motion? Okay. Are there any questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will enter debate. And seeing no debate, we will go and call to question on this motion. And polls are now open. And 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed. And the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to our next motion from the Governance and Finance Standing Committee, the Club Support Committee Terms of Reference Amendment. This motion has been moved by Councillor Rocchese and seconded by Councillor Raja. Councillor Rocchese, would you like to speak to this motion?
Vanessa Rocchese, Health Science President. So just to reiterate what's already said, this is kind of something that's already been done this past year, so we're just kind of putting it on paper. So it's kind of very similar to the previous motion, just in a different committee.
Councillor Raja, would you like to speak to this motion? Great. Okay, are there any questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will enter debate. And seeing no debate, we will call to question on this motion. Polls are now open. Three, two, one. Polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to our motion from the Student Experience Standing Committee, reducing financial barriers for faculty, off-campus, and affiliate SOFs. This motion has been moved by Councillor Danesi and seconded by Councillor Kamenetsky. Councillor Danesi, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yeah, so currently there is $7,000 set aside in the 2018-2019 USC budget for faculty SOFs that are in need of financial assistance to apply to reduce their fees. So the current cost of SOFing on paper is a $30 SOF fee plus up to $100 for your uniform. There's numerous undocumented costs associated with SOFing, which are sort of covered in the survey that is in the agenda after this. But a lot of SOFs, for example, buy their first year's presents, spend a lot of money during O week on miscellaneous items. So in the past, the process for applying to this fund has just basically been you email the SPO explaining your situation, and it's on a case-by-case basis, and not a lot of SOFs know about it. So what this motion is doing is essentially just tasking the SPO with creating a formal process for applying to and distributing this money, and the autonomy is sort of left to the SPO, and Karina has indicated that she is very much willing to do this and come up with a process for this. And then sort of the last action clause is tasking the SPO in the long term to work with the orientation program to reduce the expenses for SOFing.
Councillor Kamenetsky, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you. So just really quickly, the essence of this motion that was talked about in our committee is that there won't be any burden of having to look at parents' income statements or anything like that. It would just be purely by request. You would get your SOF fees subsidized. And there was also a question brought up, what if the $7,000 is completely used up? In our opinion, in the Standing Committee's opinion, that would be a great sign for the USC to continue looking into further funding the SOFs and increasing that budget, so that would only be a positive indicator.
Are there any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Teja?
Inam Teja, Huron President. I just noticed in the wording of the motion that it included faculty, off-campus, and affiliate SOFs. I'm just curious if you looked into the SOF fees associated with charity SOFing, if there are any related to that, and whether or not that should be included in this motion.
Do you want to talk? Yeah. I'm gonna let Matt talk.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Sorry, Mac McIntosh, outgoing student programs officer. It should be included, so we can add that in. That's
Yeah, so I guess generally when people talk about SOFing, like charity SOFs sort of fall under that focus statement, but obviously if it's a motion, we should include charity SOFs, so you're right. So, yeah.
We'll wait till debate to add that in. Councillor Hollenberg?
Joshua Hollenberg, Law Counselor. If we're going to formalize the process, is there any plan to formalize amounts? So if you're going to have a formal request process, there should also be clear limits on what may be refunded, caps on what may be refunded, and such. Informal processes work well with informal requests, but I don't see anything in here about if there's a plan to do that, who would be in charge of that, if that would need to come before this council. What is the process for that?
Right. So the idea with the motion is that most of the autonomy on that front is left up to the SPO. So we didn't kind of want to dictate the exact process for applying, but it is assumed that the SPO would create this process. Like, it's not like a case-by-case thing. I just want to emphasize that. Like, we do picture a natural process with like questions you have to answer and then numbers based off that.
Councillor Ma?
Charles Ma, social science counselor. I had two questions. One was to the movers for this motion, and the other was to the speaker. So for this motion, you mentioned that you won't be looking through any financial records or kind of assessing the student's financial situation. So if that's the case, I was just curious what would be going on the application then if we're not considering in terms of like financial.
So sorry, I think that statement was maybe a little bit misunderstood. We're going to be like requesting information about the student's financial situation. What Councillor Kamenetsky, I believe, was getting at was it's not going to be detailed like an OSAP application where you have to like send in parents' incomes and stuff, but we definitely will be assessing financial situation. That will be primarily what it's based off of.
Okay, got it. And my second question was, if I'm an incoming SOF, am I allowed to vote on this?
No.
No? Okay.
Any other questions regarding this motion? Yes, Councillor Adair? Can you use the microphone, please? Thank you.
Just point of information, just a question about if you're an incoming SOF, can you vote on this, just abstain on the clicker?
Yes.
Or? Okay. Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Liu?
Cecilia Liu, music president. I was just wondering, I know this is for focus SOFs, however, I know that the cost of uniforms is subsidized by housing for resident SOFs, however, would you consider opening this up to resident SOFs, considering the fact that they have to also pay to live in residence, and they might also buy miscellaneous items for their first year as well?
Right. So currently resident SOFs, like you said, have the uniform subsidized leave. They also have the $30 SOF fee subsidized. As well, res SOFs don't really fall under the purview of the USC. They're under housing, so I was kind of hesitant to include them in this.
Councillor O'Connor?
Okay, point of information.
Can you use them?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry, point of information to Mac. Can I vote on it?
I'd abstain as well.
Okay.
Just to be safe.
Any other questions?
Can I do a point of information? So
Yes.
is a majority vote of the majority of people voting? Like, does that exclude people abstaining?
Yeah, it includes it excludes abstentions.
Okay. 'Cause I feel like there's a lot of SOFs in this room. Okay.
Yes, Councillor Woodside.
I'm a Woodside nursing counselor. Just a question to, I guess, whoever can answer, but is there any kind of like outlook onto once the SPO has a plan before it's implemented, like what communication there would be with USC to kind of get updated on what the actual plan is?
Right. So the motion does word it for this plan to be implemented by this coming O week. So it's not really like prominently said in the motion, but I have met with people involved in the orientation program, and the goal is for the SPO to have this kind of figured out before soft training, which happens in June, and to communicate it to SOFs at that point, and also through email.
Any other questions? Councillor Liu?
Point of information, should outgoing SOFs vote on this?
Yeah, I think that's less of a conflict of interest, so should be fine.
Councillor Woodside?
Point of information?
Just think you don't actually need to raise your placard for a point of information. You can just, yeah.
Just to clarify, my question was what communication would be like to the USC, like about what the plan actually is.
Oh, okay. Well, so it would be the SPO developing the plan, right? So I would kind of assume they would like tell the executive about the plan, and yeah, I don't know.
Also, just to clarify, the question period is technically an entire point of information. And then if you are requesting information during the debate period, that is when you would use a point of information. Okay, great. So we'll move on now to debate. Is there any debate? Councillor Hollenberg.
I'd like to propose a friendly amendment.
There's no such thing.
I mean, it's me, so fair. Hi.
It wasn't against you.
So I would like to add, if it would be accepted, be it resolved that the SPO shall submit to council recommendations on definitions of what may be reimbursed and requirements or limitations on who may submit a request for reimbursement and any caps or limitations on reimbursement requests. This would merely formalize what I understand is to be submitted to council. That there would be, we receive then what the outlines, what the formal process would be for the submissions, and that would allow us to revisit this to make sure that things are being done, in an orderly manner.
Do you have this written down?
More or less, yes.
Could you potentially send it to us, to me, just because that was quite a long amendment? And then we'll get it up on the screen so everyone can see it. All right, so while we're getting that on the slide, I'll just repeat what Councillor Hollenberg sent to me, and then I'll look for a seconder for this motion to amend. So be it resolved that the SPO shall submit to council recommendations on definitions of what may be reimbursed, any requirements or limitations on who may submit a request for reimbursement, and caps or limitations on reimbursement requests. So I will look for a seconder for this motion to amend. Councillor Woodside. Are there any questions regarding this amendment? Okay, seeing none, we'll enter a debate on this amendment. Councillor Raja.
Ashiana Raja, social science counselor, speaking in favor of this motion. For the past 2 years, I was a faculty soft, and I think like this year alone, it was $142 just for the fees. That's a lot for a volunteer position, especially when you're spending a ton of money during a week on buying food, buying medicine, or buying halls when your voice goes away, which you share with the entire team in your frosh. So it does get quite expensive, especially for me, who has to pay for everything myself, and I'm broke. So I think it would help quite a bit with soft. So yeah, I think this is a great idea.
President Pratt.
More of a point. Yes. Sorry, I'm new here. Mr. Pratt, incoming USC president. So more of a point, but also a question to Councillor Hollenberg as well, if he wants to reply. Is the spirit of this amendment merely defining the guidelines of what is applicable to apply for reimbursement for? My question, my point is the difficult nature of defining probably like the broader scope of what is actually applicable to apply for, is it might have to be case by case, as well as the who side of it as well, on who may submit. If you maybe just want to clarify that a bit more.
Gladly. So the idea here is on the first point, the definitions of what may be reimbursed. This is to prevent things like, say, alcohol from being submitted as a food and beverage expense. This can be written, and I think this should be something that should go back to subcommittee. That would be written in a way to include the sorts of expenses that have come up, such as uniform fees, admissions fees, halls, food for a group. It can be written in such a way that it is clear what it intends to include and exclude. The second point as to who may submit, this would obviously, first of all, be in order to limit it to softs, so that someone who takes it upon themselves to buy something for their group cannot submit as a soft. And second, I understand there's some form of means testing that may be involved, and this would be to define any terms or limitations on that front. Does that answer your question?
Any other debate on this motion? Councillor Dinesi? You can still ask a question during debate. Yes.
Councillor Dinesi, Science Councillor. Just in terms of, I guess, you're wording this in a way where you think that people will kind of be submitting expenses after the fact, whereas the idea is that they would apply to this before the fees are due in early August. So can you just kind of clarify your intention there?
The intention remains the same then. It would be, if this is a proactive as opposed to a reactive, the specific wording can go back to subcommittee if it needs to be refined. But the idea, again, is simply that with the introduction of a formal request comes the need for formal guidelines on who and what may be part of that formal process. This is one of the benefits of an ad hoc system, but if we're moving away from an ad hoc system, we need to define what is involved to avoid abuse and to proactively answer questions of the incoming softs.
Councillor O'Connor?
Jordan O'Connor, social science counselor. Just a question, I guess, to everyone. Basically, so when it says putting a cap on or limitation on reimbursement, I think it's important because I don't think this motion it really looks at what we're going to be giving back to softs. So there's over 800 softs. There's only $7,000, so we couldn't reimburse $130 for every soft. So it's what is the limit for who gets what and what amount of money, I think needs to be looked at and clarified. So I'm in favor of this motion for that specific reason, because it's hard when you're just looking at the original motion to be like, it kind of seems like every soft that applies will get the $130. That might not be the case, and we don't have the funds for that to happen.
Any other debate on this motion? Councillor Dinesi?
I'll speak for the amendment as it stands, but I just maybe want to clarify that I don't think it's really worded in a way that implies anyone that applies to it is going to get $130, and I definitely don't think that's the intention of it.
Any further debate on this amendment? Yes, Councillor Ma? Can you use the microphone?
Out of curiosity, once the SPO has decided on what can and can't be reimbursed, is council going to vote on that, or is that just final?
Sorry. So ultimately, how the money is spent, a creation of some type of policy or something like that will most likely fall to the operations committee of orientation, which oversees a lot of the day-to-day logistics and a lot of the planning of orientation week and the orientation program as a whole. But that being said, appreciating council's input, the fact that the $7,000 is part of the USC budget, and it's important that the USC council has a say in those pieces. So it's a bit of a blurry line. But I think that really the hope would be that Karina would be able to come back with something that was created by operations and her, and see it be approved by the team in this room.
Any further debate? All right, seeing none, we will call to question on this amendment. All those in favor of the proposed amendment by placard? All right, that's definitely majority. The amendment is approved. And we will now move back to debating the motion as amended.
Point of personal privilege, it's not on the screen anymore.
Oh, we're just changing the color, sorry. There we go. Okay, debate, Councillor Dinesi.
So I'd like to propose to amend to change the first action clause to read at the end that all faculty off-campus, affiliate, and charity softs can access.
So just adding in the charity
Yes.
softs?
Yep.
I'll look for a seconder for that motion to amend. Councillor Teja, are there any questions regarding that motion to amend? Seeing none, we will enter debate. And seeing no debate, we will call to question on that amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your placard. And that is majority, and that amendment is approved. And we will now return to debating the motion as twice amended. Any debate? Councillor Chang, yes. Proxy for
Proxy.
the Vice President.
Proxy for Vice President Chang. Just a quick question for Council for clarification. So it was noted earlier on that we want to be able to present this to the SOFs during their training, and I think it was June. However, Council does not convene next in this room until July. So how would you prefer me following up with you all as per the recent, be it further resolved? Is an online poll okay, or does email work? I just want to ensure that there's a proper channel of communication here as per the recent, be it further resolved.
Councillor Hollenberg.
Speaking purely for myself, I feel like this is something that could, if this were, say, addressed to the operations subcommittee by email, or if they so choose, by some form of poll to demonstrate approval, that in my mind would be sufficient, but I am open to commentary.
Jordan O'Connor, Social Science Counselor. When exactly is the SOFI collected?
Can I answer that? I mean, you're on staff, so but like
I know, but I don't collect.
No,
the
I know, but like
so.
so typically it's been the second week of August. I mean, if you want to talk to someone and see if that's changed, but I doubt it has. But it's second week of August, yeah.
Yeah, it should. Yeah, I was going to say August. And I should have known that off the top of my head. I apologize, but yes, yeah. So in August we usually collect, and then we see most collections come in by the time the week before a week rolls around, before training week rolls around, and then we collect those last few during training week.
So you collect it before they come back for N week? Yeah. Okay.
Any other input with regards to communication? Is that good? Okay, great. Any other debate on?
Sorry, just a further point of information for Councilor Hollenberg. Do you want this tasked to ops or back to student experience as well for the recommendations to vote?
I don't have a strong preference. Whichever one would be would most relevant for this determination. If it's student experience, and that sounds fine. If that's okay with the student experience.
Just a point of information for the student experience chair. Is this relevant?
I don't necessarily feel it should be sent back to the committee. The committee studied it, and we were all unanimously agreed that the motion is fit as it is up there.
Sorry, just a follow-up. More the recommendations the SPO produces as per the last BERT amendment that was.
Oh, if the SPO wants to submit the recommendations to student experience, then yeah, that's fine.
Any further debate on the motion as twice amended? All right, seeing none, we will call the question on this motion using the clickers, and the polls are now open. All right, 3, 2, 1, and polls are closed, and the motion passes. Okay, we will now move on to our other motions, starting with the motion to elect a USC representative to the Parking Appeals Committee. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Watson and Councillor Van Galen. I will look for nominations for a councillor to take on this position. Councillor Abel.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Fernandez.
Councillor Fernandez, do you accept this nomination?
No, thank you.
Great. Any other nominations? Councillor Ma?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Polster.
Councillor Polster, do you accept?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foreman,
I'd like to nominate Councillor Raja.
do you accept? Okay. Wonderful. Councillor Watson? No? Okay. Any other nominations? All right, seeing none, Councillor Raja, you are acclaimed. Congratulations. All right, moving on to our next election, the motion to elect a USC representative to the SSC hiring committee. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Polster, Councillor Dinesi. Any nominations for this position?
Point of information.
Sorry, who's, yes, Rokesi?
What exactly is the SSC hiring committee?
Good question. President Pratt?
Not Science Student Council, the Student Services Committee.
There you go.
So the Student Services Committee is a committee that the president is involved in, and I've never been to a meeting for. But it's all the outward-facing services of the university. So SOGS sits on it, and then there's also university representatives, and they speak about sort of like fee increases to ancillary services and other issues facing that. And so this would be on the hiring committee, I believe, to elect a general student to sit as a representative on it. And so this is to ensure that the process of selecting students to a committee, which is very important and affects students in that way, is done in a democratic process.
Okay. Councillor Rokesi? No, okay. Councillor Teja?
Inam Teja here, I'm President. I'd like to nominate Councillor Vezina.
Councillor Vezina, do you accept? Yes? Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Just a point of information, if you want to be hired for the Student Services Committee, you cannot be a sitting member on the panel. I think this is fairly evident, but I think that it just needs to be said before anyone else nominates himself as well. Yeah. And it's a small commitment as well.
Okay. Councillor Watson?
I would like to nominate Councillor Van Galen.
Councillor Van Galen, do you accept?
It's Kay.
Oh, okay. Any other nominations? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Vezina, congratulations, you are acclaimed. Okay, moving on. The motion to elect council members to the LGBTQ2+ Special Committee of Council. There are 3 ordinary members who will be elected, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Foreman, Councillor Baldwin. Nominations for this committee. Councillor Watson.
I would just quickly like to speak to this mostly toward affiliate. Last year, there was a motion passed that they wanted that you all wanted 1/3 representation. So just now is the chance to get that.
Okay. Councillor Dinesi.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Marginian.
Do you accept? Yes. Okay. Great. Councillor Foreman.
I'd like to nominate Councillor O'Connor.
Councillor O'Connor, do you accept? Councillor Vezina.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Hunter.
Councillor Hunter, do you accept? Yes. Okay. Councillor McGee.
Sorry, now that 3 people have already been elected, can I still
It's just nominations, so you can
okay.
yeah, keep
I'd
going.
like to nominate Councillor Anthony.
Councillor Anthony, do you accept?
Proxy for
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Anthony. Yes. he
Okay.
does.
Councillor Teja? No? Okay. Any further nominations? Councillor Watson?
I was just wondering if it would be possible for me to amend this to open it up to 4 positions. Sitting on the committee last year, we had 4 positions anyway, so.
Sure. The terms of reference say a minimum of 3, so if you'd like to amend, I'll look for a seconder for that amendment. Just, yeah, Councillor Rocchese. That's all. Yeah, just to amend. Anyone opposed to that amendment? Okay, no, seeing none, I will take it as approved. So we will now be electing 4 councillors to this committee. Any further nominations? Councillor Liu?
I'm just wondering what the time commitment is like.
Can I speak to that as
Yes.
previous chair? Okay. So I was the chair last year of this committee. It was a really awesome experience. The commitment is really depending on what the committee sets out to do for the next year. We had a lot of work to do. So, but even then, we only really met at most bi-weekly, and overall, it ended up only having 5 or 6 meetings throughout the course of the year. So it really wasn't too much. There is like research to do. There are still meetings to do. It's kind of like another mini standing committee per se, slightly more chill, and like less formal. But yeah, it's mostly just 5 or 6 meetings throughout the year and a little bit of meeting with other people or resources just to extend that.
Any other nominations? All right, seeing as there are 4 positions and 4 members nominated, congratulations, you are all acclaimed. Okay. Moving on to motion 8, the Speaker of Council for the 2018-2019 Council ratification. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for this. Councillor Rocchese, Councillor Kamenetsky. So it's not stated, but I am the incoming Speaker of Council. So now you know who you're voting on. And yeah, I guess we'll vote now. All those in favor?
So there was a formal hiring process. Just so everyone's aware, there were applications submitted. They were reviewed by the Senior Manager of Government and Advocacy Services, who is the official manager of the Speaker of Council. And then there was a hiring panel of 2 councillors from the previous council, as well as the Senior Manager of Advocacy and Government Services. And they interviewed various qualified candidates, and then their selection was Madison based on her qualifications.
Okay, any questions, debate? Councillor Barroso.
Hello, Victoria Barroso, Science Counselor. I was just wondering if, I don't know who to direct this to, if I direct it to you or not, but if you'd be open to completing training before starting your term into like this next year.
So, I mean, I guess I can speak to this. Because it's now a formal intern position, there will be formal training that will occur before September, I believe.
And would you be willing to complete it? Or
Oh, it's like a part of the position now.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions or debate? All right, seeing none, we will vote on this motion using clickers. Okay, and 3, 2, 1, polls are closed, and the motion passes. Okay, moving on to our next motion, the ratification of the 2018-2019 legislative calendar. I will look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Marfil and Councillor Al-Shamil. Any questions regarding this motion? Any debate? All right, seeing none, we will call to question using clickers, and polls are open. Three, two, one. Polls are closed, and the motion passes. Okay, we will now move on to our next motion. Executive external leadership endorsement of the president. I will look for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Councillor Stebbing and Councillor Baldwin. Any questions regarding this motion? Okay, any debate? Seeing none, we will now move to call to question using clickers, and polls are open. All right, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to our next motion, executive external leadership endorsement of the Secretary Treasurer. I will look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Stebbing and Councillor Kamenetsky. Any questions regarding this motion? All right, any debate? Seeing none, we will call to question on this motion with clickers, and polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, our next motion, executive external leadership endorsement of the Vice President. I will look for a mover and a seconder, Councillor Marginian and Councillor Polster. Any questions regarding this motion? Okay, any debate regarding this motion? All right, seeing none, we will call to question using clickers, and polls are now open. And 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, we now have our for information section, which constitutes our executive reports.
Sorry, I actually That's good. I'm literally just running for the company.
Hi everyone, just a heads up, so because Toby and Landon aren't here tonight, Landon's exec report is posted on OWL, and Toby's exec report will be posted to OWL. So if you're interested in what they're up to, check OWL. Okay.
Yeah, they don't actually know who I am. Why would they? Not really. Last night, Karina. That's good. He doesn't know. He potentially knows who I am too. He knows who I am. Yeah. Same with Ethan. She'll be like, hi, so good to see you. And I'll be like, hi, Matt McIntosh. So yeah. Nice to see you. Shut up. You guys want? This is not council anymore. It's okay. They want nothing to do with our exams. You just cut it. They all look very nice. They look so cute. Yeah, they look very, even in the trenches. They don't look good. You don't look like the first hiring.
Yeah, I'm struggling for another.
Can you come up with a little yawn joke before I start? That I can make? Should I see a little boat? Will that make me young and hip with the young friend? Oh.
You should talk. How do I go on Do Not Disturb?
Don't Josh Clark doesn't have to do things rubs like stuff from the 80s and 90s. I know he loves George. Like, he tried to touch his electric on me all year. Yeah. Like he didn't know the game of season 1, and we sold 2 million. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's a balance of being good artists and doing other stuff.
I have weird niche.
And so do I. What I used to do is I used to go into the wave, and I used to go to any table that had a large group of people, and I guess the table said yes. That was how I did it.
That was kind of loud, sorry. Okay, we're ready to go up here, so we'll start with our executive reports.
Cool. Wonderful. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mac McIntosh. I'm the Outgoing Student Programs Officer. I'll speak a little bit to, usually mine are a little less detailed. I usually just run through the events that we've done in the past month, and then the events that we're currently working on, and then things that are to come. So in the past month, since our last council meeting, we had a great concert at the London Convention Centre with Lil Yachty. We had a couple thousand people out. It was a lot of fun. And then also in March, we had the Spring Musical. So If Then played in the Mustang Lounge for 4 nights. It was a great performance, and Emma and her team did a really, really great job. We also had one of the most successful Relay for Lifes in recent memory, and huge number of participants, and we raised over $60,000. Wonderful, wonderful event, and super well organized by the entire charity team and the Canadian Cancer Society as well. We had a great USG event in mid-March as well, with London community members and different politicians and Western community members, prominent females, coming out to speak with students about feminism and a variety of other issues on International Women's Day. The Income Tax Clinic ran in this room over the past week and a half, and we also ran Refill to Win in order to compete with Tim Hortons' Roll Up the Rim to Win, and it did great. It was at the Spoke and at Hospitality Services around campus. Currently, this list keeps on getting shorter and shorter, so we're working on new club applications still, and that should be done by the end of this week. The club's re- and de-ratification process should also be done by the end of this week, so we're trying to finish all that up right before exams. Crisis counseling with CMHA and Student Health Services is currently ongoing until the exam period begins. And then we're also really starting to plan for orientation. So we're ramping up our meetings there, making sure that we're talking with different stakeholders on campus and trying to get everything in order so that we have at least a general schedule of the week and a good idea of where we're moving forward with training and things like that as we enter the summer. To come, transition obviously, so Karina was elected, which is fantastic, and it's going to be a wonderful year for all of you guys to work with her. So we'll work on that over the next 6 weeks. We also have our last really major event tomorrow night in the Wave. The James Barker Band is coming in, our first country show of the year, if you're a country fan. And then also we'll do midnight breakfast and some de-stress programming during exams over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. Cool. Are there any questions? Wonderful.
Hi everyone, you may know me as Erin Macaulay, the Ivy Counselor, but I am currently Erin Macaulay, Secretary Treasurer. Excited to be one of you in a couple months. So completed as I finish up my role. We're going through the final board and council cycle, so obviously this is the last sort of council meeting that I'll be involved in. And then the last board meeting is on Friday, so we had all of our committee meetings, a lot of really good dialogue there, and the incoming board is going through a lot of training. So the budget has been fully approved and released on our website, and we shared it on social media. media. So I would recommend that all of you take some time to look through that. It's a fairly long document, but it's quite comprehensive in talking about what all of our departments do, all of the fee changes from this year to next year, all of the fees that we do collect, because there are a lot of administered fees to other groups on campus, and so there's quite a few narratives in there that'll really give you a bit of a context to the organization as you come into your roles. My project throughout the year is called Project Ovidius because it's like the metamorphosis of the governance structure of the USC. So we've been working with external consultants. They're called Pillar Nonprofit. So we've had a lot of consultations with them throughout the year where we've involved board and council. And so last night we had representatives from the outgoing board of directors and the outgoing council come together with some of our staff members and look at a couple recommendations and just bring forward more of their concerns about the way that our governance structure works within the organization, because I'm sure, as you're well aware of, it's quite convoluted and confusing. So we're really working to simplify that and make it as accessible as possible. And so that recommendation report will be coming forward soon, but that meeting happened yesterday. All of you approved the policy manual list at the AGM, which was something that I was working on. So that was sort of a terms of reference for a comprehensive governance manual of the entire organization. And so that had a list of every single policy and governance document and the date that it was ratified, so that it makes it easier to track down those documents. So at that point in time, only the terms of reference was completed. And I'll go into current as to when you'll see the full document. I judged Battle of the Bands, really important part of the job. We found really good bands, quite a lot of talent here at Western. And the Campus Trust is our campus health plan that the USC administers. And so it's managed through a board of trustees with representatives from all of the member schools. And so we were looking critically at that as I was the chair of the governance committee of the Campus Trust, and finding a way to make that as engaging a process as possible. And so we reevaluated the way that the student leaders are chosen on that. And so it's now an election, which is chosen in June. And so that's going through that board of trustees to be approved by the Campus Trust. Currently, I'm working on, as I said, that policy manual, so formatting it, because there are quite a few documents, and then publishing that. So currently, all of the policies are available. They're all just in various formats and kind of difficult to reach. So feel free to reach out if you are looking for a document and you can't find it on the website, because they are all in existence. They're just not the cleanest. We have a group within the USC called the Commercial Opportunities Working Group. And so that's a committee that I sit on with our senior manager of commercial partnerships and something else, and the senior manager of food and beverage. And so we look at ways that we can expand our revenue streams. So we've been looking critically at our catering options, sort of wedding revenues and whether we can bring those in, conferences and that sort, and other sponsorship revenues, so the TVs that we have within the HGM space and how we can expand those revenues. I'm working on the annual report, so that'll be sort of a final document with all of the numbers and stats from the year. So the number of hours that we've paid students, the number of pounds of fries that we've served in the spoke, and just cool fun facts about the whole organization. And then also we do an audit with PwC every year, so I'm working with them right now to structure that audit and make sure that the documents reflect the complexity of our organization and that they sort of tie to our financial statements internally, so that the external ones that we release are easy to understand and accessible to students, and they are published in the Gazette every year if you ever want to look back historically at our audited financial statements. And then to come, like I said, coming out of that meeting that happened, we'll be having a recommendation report from Project Ovidius. The annual report will be completed, working on transition with Andrea, the incoming Secretary-Treasurer. Another project sort of looking at our fee governance. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of administered fees. So looking at how we renew those, similar to how we worked with CHRW this year to have a new referendum to look critically at their fee. All of the fees that we do collect, we want to ensure that we're being fiscally responsible and that we have agreements set out with those organizations. And then also working with the SPO on a club's policy review plan that will be leaving to the incoming executive. And that is all the fun governance and finance stuff I have to talk about. Any questions? Cool, thanks.
Hey everyone, my exec report is far more underwhelming with the year closing in. So the student survey was sent out to all students, and we ended up we're not finished yet, but we're getting close. We're going to close it just before exams because we don't expect too many students to be filling it out afterwards. But right now we're looking at about a 10% response rate from students, so about over 3,000 responses, which is actually pretty good and tracking well with what we were able to get last year. So just moving into kind of organizing all that data, figuring out kind of the directives that students are putting forward from their feedback into the organization, how we can make sure that student feedback remains at the forefront of everything that we do. So that's kind of completed. Current, so still working on building relationships with external media to build out the PR aspects of the organization. So, and then holistic student feedback. So this is a project that I spoke at with the previous council, but basically the idea of holistic student feedback is that we're going to start implementing a bunch of smaller surveys that are designed to get consistent student feedback that will guide our advocacy priorities on an ongoing basis. So that when students come speak to executives, whether it's at office hours or just have a concern, we can say, hey, great, hand them an iPad, they can fill out a quick 2-minute survey, and then that those results can constantly and consistently be used when meeting with different stakeholders, whether it's on campus, whether it's in the city, province, or federally. So that's just an ongoing project. And then to come transition, so working with Michaela, who's communications officer next year, on how we can really build out the PR aspects of this organization and make sure that it's fully functioning the way that it should. That's all I really have for today. Any questions? Fantastic. It's been sweet. See you guys.
Okay, great. We will now move on to the report from the chair of the board of directors.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Rebecca. I'm the new chair of the board of directors. I thought I might start today by telling you a little bit about what the board of directors are before I get too much into it. So basically, we are the body that oversees the corporate side of the organization. Since we are a not-for-profit corporation, you're required to have a board of directors. So we're 9 students. We take on a 2-year term, and we basically have a fiduciary duty to the USC. And so our main goal is, 1, ensuring the USC continues, and 2, ensuring that our mission and vision are continuing to exist. So what that means basically is we try to make sure the USC doesn't go bankrupt. We try to make sure that we're following the laws, and we try to make sure that you're still actually trying to work towards the good of the students. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm around. You can also email me at the bodchair@westernusc.ca. Feel free. So in this cycle, we're welcoming in some new members. You guys actually ratified them at the AGM. So that's Nikki Carr, Braden Reem Neal, Angus Lay, Anthony Lee, and Sagar Juwani. So we've just completed our committee cycle with the incoming and outgoing members, which has been really good because we got to have a little bit of a transition there. And on Friday, we're going to have our first board meeting of the new year. At that meeting, we're going to be looking at the 3rd quarterly financial report and some recommendations on spoke funding. So we did approve spoke funding, but we're just sorting out where we're taking the money from now. That's about it. Does anybody have any questions for me? Great. I'll see you guys next year, I guess.
Okay, we will now have the report from the chair of the student senators.
I guess I'm the only senator here, so I'll say something. Right
Do you
now,
want to come up to the front?
Hi, I'm Massimo. I'm the incoming vice chair undergraduate for the student senators. Right now, we are hiring our directors for the working groups and for everything else. That should be done by this weekend. We have our training Sunday, so we'll actually like start working on stuff by next week, I guess. Yeah, that's it for updates. Thanks.
Okay, we will now have the report from the 2018 Spring USA General Assembly representative.
Hey folks, so I'm Jared Foreman, Social Science President, and I was one of the 11 representatives to the USA GA 3 weeks or so ago in Sudbury, Ontario at Laurentian University. So I'll just quickly go over the 3 papers that we approved and the 3 papers that USA will be discussing at the next GA. So the first paper that went for approval was student mobility and transfer credits. So that's just discussing how to improve sort of student mobility in terms of moving to different universities and transferring credits and issues surrounding that. It was a highly technical paper, and there's not a whole lot of controversy around it, so it passed without any sort of issues. The next paper was surrounding mature students. Again, in general, there's not a lot of controversy over the papers that were discussed at the UCGA. So this one is discussing issues that are pertinent to mature students. So issues discussed including a definition of mature students, looking into more statistics surrounding sort of their needs and interests. And that's about it. There's, again, little controversy at the USA General Assembly over wording and whatnot. I mean, besides from Queens, who sort of tried to cut down the paper, but in the end, sort of we got our way on that, so that's good. And the last paper, Landon Talk was actually one of the authors on this one, was on student mental health and wellness. So this was quite an all-encompassing paper addressing things relating to physical health, sexual health, just essentially a variety of different issues within what's essentially, a paper that has quite a large scope. Again, Western generally had all their interests met with this paper, and it passed through the General Assembly quite quickly. In the next GA, they'll be discussing open educational resources and online resources, which has been a big topic on campus recently. We'll also be discussing sort of teaching assessments and practices around that. And the last paper at the next GA will be discussed will be tuition. So that's about it.
Okay, we will now have our reports from the Standing Committee chairs, starting with the chair of the Governance and Finance Standing Committee.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So my name is Charles, and at the past Governance and Finance Committee, it was about 2 weeks ago, and we elected our vice chair, our recording secretary, and we also brought forth the terms of reference amendments that the council voted on earlier. So thank you for that. We also got a motion for new business from the social science president, Jared Foreman, about potentially replacing PricewaterhouseCoopers as our auditor. But that was actually just a result of a bit of miscommunication or misunderstanding about PwC's role, and ultimately we decided to strike that down. As well, we actually spent a lot of time talking about the recent motion that was brought forth to have the SPO ballot be public upon request. So we spent a large portion of the meeting discussing that, but ultimately we concluded that we planned on respecting the decision of the previous council and at least try to see how this motion turns out, and then maybe if it causes issues in the future that we do amend it, but for now to just stick with the previous council's decision. So that's it for the Governance and Finance Committee. Thank you.
We will now have the chair of the Advocacy Standing Committee.
Just a point of information, please don't tap on the microphones.
Hey guys, my name is Inam and I'm the chair for the Advocacy Standing Committee. We met a couple Fridays ago and we got a lot done. We elected our vice chair, congratulations to Kieran over there, and also our recording secretary, Tio. So they are doing a lot of great work for this committee coming up, and I'm excited to have them on board. As for what we discussed, we brought the motion regarding women in leadership positions to council. We debated it a lot and thought it had a lot of potential, and so I'm glad that this council passed the motion. We also had a for discussion item regarding a Westerns investment portfolio. Ariana was handing out some cards regarding that before this meeting, and I'm sure if you're interested in learning more, she can tell you a little bit about it. But that's something that our committee plans on discussing again in the future. Furthermore, a couple other items that are on our discussion list next time we meet is Western's environmental strategy. So looking at the fact that McGill recently banned all plastic water bottles from campus, this is something that our committee has indicated interest in discussing, so if you have any opinions on that, please bring it forward to us. As well as the academic accommodation for non-varsity academics has come up at our meeting, and so this is another thing that we may be discussing in the future. So if you do have anything to contribute on those 2 points or anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out, because we'd love to have you represented, and if you have a lot of experience in any of those topics, feel free to come to our meetings. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
And now the chair of the Student Experience Standing Committee.
Hi, everyone. For those of us that haven't met, my name is Peter Dinesi, and I'm the chair of the Student Experience Committee. So at our first meeting, which was also about 2 weeks ago, we elected our vice chair, Victoria Barroso, and our recording secretary, Elliot Polster, over there. We discussed the motion that came up today about the reducing financial barriers to SOFing. We had a very good discussion during that with both Mac and Karina, and I believe everyone is very happy with the outcome and the amendments that were made, and we can all agree with that. Karina also spoke with us about sort of the goals of the committee and how she can help us achieve them, and we plan to work closely with her. We also discussed our mandates. So basically, one of the main mandates of the Student Experience Standing Committee is to review 3 to 5 executive services or programs per year. So if anybody has sort of any ideas or input as to what programs should be reviewed, feel free to let a member of the committee know. We'd love to hear that. We will likely decide on those in September. I've kind of asked each member to bring forward one service or program for a discussion, then we'll kind of narrow it down from there. We also had a discussion about long-term changes to the orientation fee. So basically working with people involved in the orientation program to put forward some sort of recommendation from the USC about how to adjust the orientation fee in the future. So for those of you that don't know, basically the fee is what the first-year students pay to participate in O Week. And for the past few years, this has been $90. This year, it's being bumped up to $100. So we're looking at sort of having more of a long-term, either increase by inflation or some sort of structured increase, as opposed to doing it kind of in case by case every few years. And we also, I would also just like to emphasize that you should utilize this committee for any kind of motions relating to student experience. Student experience is sort of something that can basically be justified as relating to a lot of things that go on in the university, and I believe last year the committee was sort of underutilized. So if you have any motions or anything that relates to student experience, please feel free to bring forward to us, and we'd love to hear any comments or concerns, like I said, about the executive services or programs. So thank you. Any questions? Cool.
And now we will have the chair of the Agenda and Council Operations Standing Committee. Hi, everyone. I'm Madison. I'm the chair of the AGOS committee. So every Wednesday before the USC meeting, the Agenda and Council Operations Standing Committee meets. We review the proposed agenda for council, and then we approve it, and then the agenda is brought to you via email through Liz, and then we approve it at the USC meeting. We met, approved the agenda, and we'll continue to do that for the rest of the year. Any questions? Okay, great. We'll move on to our for discussion section of the agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to bring to the council floor for discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to new business. Sorry. Councillor Dinesi brought forward a new business motion. which I believe was shared in your Facebook group. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to look it over. So it was moved by Councillor Dinesi and seconded by Councillor Campbell. Councillor Dinesi, would you like to speak to this motion?
Sorry, that's the wrong version of the motion. I sent a revised one. I posted a revised one in the Facebook group at 7 o'clock about, because it kind of hasn't been formally put in the agenda, I can do that without amending it. That would be it.
Yeah.
So basically, Active Minds Western, which is a USC ratified club, has released and published a recommendations paper outlining 11 main recommendations that the university can take to basically improve mental health and wellness on campus. So they basically approached me and they wanted the USC to sort of give their stamp of approval on this paper. They were very clear in that they don't want the USC executive or anyone to really be tasked with implementing the recommendations because they have their own plan to do that. So this is basically just us kind of saying, yeah, we've seen this paper and we like it. And the reason it was sort of reworded from what was previously posted is because the old version, which basically just said the USC supports the recommendations in this paper, gives the implication that we're adopting it as a policy, which we don't want to do. And after discussing with Danny, we decided this was a better wording to go with.
Councillor Campbell, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yeah. Ann Campbell, social science counselor. Just to reiterate, the new wording acknowledges its contribution. And so no one is tasking the executive with anything. And so I'm speaking in favor of this motion. And after consulting with the research coordinator of Active Minds advocacy team, they acknowledged that one of the weaknesses of the paper is the polling didn't necessarily follow proper methodological standards of random sampling due to its limited resources and it being a student club. And as a council, I think it's important that we acknowledge that. However, I don't think that delegitimizes the paper. Just something for a point of, just for your own information.
Any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Lawler.
Kieran Lawler, social science counselor. So essentially the way this is worded, we're essentially, council is just saying, thank you Active Minds for going through with this report, and we're not really doing anything based on
so
that.
I'm aware that it's very little that's being done. Active Minds just basically wants this as us saying, yes, okay, great, good paper, and that way they can use that as weighting when they're speaking to the university about implementing the recommendations. So they can say, yeah, the USC likes this.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will enter debate. President Pratt.
Mr. Pratt, incoming president. Speaking in favor of the motion as it currently stands, I really do want to commend Active Minds Western for their active commitment to kind of promoting the positive culture and the conversation surrounding mental health and wellness on this campus as well, and kind of all the work they've done for the plebiscite, and as well as producing this report. I think it's fantastic that our clubs on our campus are producing thorough policy that can inform our decisions on this council floor as well, and I definitely commend their efforts in this. This is why I'm speaking in favor of the motion as well. Definitely encourage others as well.
Councillor Ma. Councillor Teja.
I'm Teja, Huron president. I'm also speaking in favor of this motion. I think it's really important that we support student advocacy that goes outside of the USC. While it's important to realize that the work we do here is very important and impactful, students don't need to get into this organization to do advocacy work, and I think it's important that we reinforce that. I also want to commend the authors for changing the wording because I think it's important that we don't use this paper to sort of take away from the mental health paper that was passed by the 16-17 council or by the USA paper. So I'm in favor of the motion as it currently stands.
Any other debate regarding this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will call to question using clickers, and the polls are now open. All right, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, Are there any other new business motions that someone would like to bring to council at this time? Can you use the microphone?
If I just wanted to ask something that maybe should have been brought up in for discussion, would that be possible to do now?
You could motion to the council to allow for you to bring something forward for discussion.
I'd like to motion to the council to allow me to just bring a point for discussion.
Okay, I'll look for a seconder for that motion. Councillor Rocchese, does anyone object to Councillor Lawler bringing forth for discussion?
Could we amend it so that Michaela could also bring up something in for discussion?
Sure. I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Polster, Councillor Denezi. Any objections to that amendment to the motion? No? Okay. Well, that amendment is approved. Anyone object to the motion as amended to have a for discussion section added? Okay. We'll vote on this. Nobody objected, so I'll take it as approved. Councillor Lawler, please.
So I just wanted to bring up the possible impending TA strike on campus. I feel like this is something that we should, as a council, be kind of talking about, at least seeing what the position maybe of the executive is on the possible strike and what kind of action that the USC would be taking in the event of a strike, and like how it would affect students and how kind of we would be reacting to the possible outcomes of the TAs going on strike. So if one of the executives could possibly shed a bit of light on that, that'd be much appreciated.
So there was a policy that was passed a couple meetings ago by council, and it is in regards to the USC's role within labor disputes, and it is that we remain unbiased in these. We do try to make as much information accessible as possible, and I'd be more than happy to send you the policy, but we won't be taking an official stance within this.
The incoming communications officer.
Hi, okay, so we've created a new Facebook group for the incoming council. It's USC 2018-2019, so if you aren't already in it, feel free to add yourself now and I'll approve it. It's just to distribute relevant information pertaining to council business.
Great. Okay, if there's nothing else, I will look for a mover and a seconder to terminate the meeting. Councillor Polster and Councillor Vezina. Any objections to terminating the meeting at 8:45? No? Okay. The meeting is terminated.